Karen Frankel here with you on another afternoon, getting you drawing. And today's a bit of a strange one. I don't know if you've ever thought of drawing your own shoes or somebody else's shoes or photographs of shoes. And they're rather nice to draw, actually. And most of my students really love drawing boots, especially. In fact, my old really gnarly pair of boots are at the other studio as props, and many people have drawn them, and some people have framed them and put them on their walls. So there's something about drawing a pair of shoes that is really quite nice. Okay, so that's the pair of boots directly from the side, and what we're going to be looking at both on boots and on shoes, it's more or less the same thing, is the proportions. And you'll notice as I change view of these boots that you can see difference. So from the side view, the depth of the shoe from the top to the bottom is much narrower than the slightly top view. Yay, Jeanette, you've got it working. There's a direct top view. Sometimes we do look at shoes like that, especially if we're facing somebody else, and that's what their shoes look like to us. We don't often see shoes directly like that. I know that there's a superstition that you don't put shoes on tables, and so you very seldom see shoes directly in front of you like that. The problems with drawing shoes arise because of perceived head drawing, what your brain tells you. What do I call it in my book? Your knowing brain tells you that you've got a long shoe like that. And I'm not drawing a real shoe right now. This is just cartoony. And you've got an ankle that fits. And for some reason, we give very little space to where the foot goes into the shoe. That's kind of a preconceived idea of what we have with shoes. And even if you take it a bit further, we generally don't allow enough space there, not only the distance of the ankle, but your foot, your foot doesn't, for want of a better drawing, doesn't turn a corner like that. Your ankle has got some width there. If I come now to these boots, that looks as if I've done that to the picture, doesn't it? Well, I'm going to prove. So you can see that there, look at the distance from where the toe part starts, right? So that's the toe part, and then already it's starting the slope up there. So getting your foot into a boot is very different to getting your foot into a shoe, but I've got my shoe here to show you the same thing. So in particular on these boots, you can see how wide the proportion of that to that is amazing. It is incredibly wide. That's the type of thing that we get wrong when it comes to boots. The other thing that we tend to get wrong is, and for shoes as well, is this height here, okay? So in this case, that's actually quite narrow. You don't often look at boots directly on the side like this. Now, if we turn it down, obviously that is the widest part of the whole boot. But as we turn it away from the camera, you can see that part is appearing shorter and shorter that way. So if let's do it with my pencil. Okay, so that's the width of the boot, and as it's going around, can you see it is getting shorter and shorter and shorter than that pencil? So that is called a foreshortening, right? And then we get back to the width of the pencil. And what's worse than that, or even more difficult, so it's reasonably easy to do it on the side because we can just look at that depth there or that depth there. The difficulty comes, and this was the photograph that I gave in the, or one of the photographs I gave in the email, which was these old boots that I found on the internet. And I do like to give a shout out to the people that produce these photographs on Unsplash, because they are free downloads and it's really nice to give them a shout out. So you can go and look at their photographs. So if I show you my boot, so that's top down, and if you're looking at somebody like that, you can pretty much see the top of their boot like that. But as it comes towards you, the distance from the back to the front is really shortening. So if I get that, I can't even put my whole hand on that distance. Let's see if I can do it with the, okay, so that the length of the boot is about the same as that A4 piece of paper, right? So there's the end of the piece of paper, and there's the end of the piece of paper there. As I turn the boot, is that working? Yeah, it is. You can see that the boot now is much shorter, and this distance here, now you can't see that distance at all. So that distance, which was there, right, as I'm turning it, can you see it getting shorter and shorter and shorter? I didn't change my fingers, but the boot is changing position. So those things are really important to observe and to measure. So if you are measuring real shoes and boots, which I highly recommend, of course you will use your pencil measuring, that sort of thing. Now, I wanted to show you just on a pair of shoes, where, especially if you've got laces, so you can undo those laces. This pair's got a zip and laces, so you don't really need the room to get into the top of the boot. However, have a look at how much width is given still for your ankle to go in there, right? So if I measure that with my pencil visually, that's about, well, I'll take it from there to there, and if I compare that to the rest of the shoe, it's about 1.5 of those to that, and not this tiny little area here that your foot goes into. Okay, and once again, you have a shape, you've got this triangular shape here because your foot is not flat, it's got a corner on it. I should have thought about this and had a picture of a foot to show you, but you all know what your foot looks like. I'm not going to stick my foot up on the desk for you to look at. So those are some of the pitfalls with shoes, and I'll show you just on this shoe, if it's pointed at the camera, again, once again, you've got the foreshortening of the distance from the top to the lace. That distance is very tiny. It's about that small when it's pointing at you, but it's much, much longer if it's not pointing at you. So I am going to draw some shoes, and I'm actually going to draw some shoes from a photograph because it's so much easier, obviously, with the camera setup. So these are some more photographs that I've taken from the Unsplash site, and again, we've got the distance of the place where the ankle goes. If I put a square on this, you can see that that distance is nearly the same. Okay, it's less than 1.5, which is what I measured on my shoe. And you've got that triangle, so you've got the toe section, and then it goes up to where the foot goes in. But if you compare it to this one, that's where your foreshortening is, and that's where the problem comes from. So that one is relatively easy to draw. So I'm actually going to draw that one and show you give you a few pointers. I printed that one out as well. There's another sort of half boot, half shoe. Again, the width and how it compares to that. And also looking at how thick the heel is and the sole of the shoe. And interesting detail like that. The main thing that I can see drawing this shoe, and this is probably the most complicated direction that you'll see, because we're not looking directly on the side and we're not looking directly at the front, so we are drawing a 3/4. Now, I don't care about that when I'm drawing, so I've trained myself to only see shapes. So if I look at the shape of this, I'll even put a colored line around it. Actually, I don't think you can see the colored line. That wasn't very helpful, was it? If I chose a purple. So if I put a colored line around there, it's kind of a funny sort of triangle. So the shape that I can see is and at the moment I haven't measured anything, okay? I probably should have. But as I'm drawing, I'm going, okay, where's the bottom of this relative to the top of that? That, even though my head is complaining and yelling at me, that is more or less the shape of that shoe. And as I'm talking to you, I am realizing where my mistakes are. For example, this slope here, if I put that ankle in, can you see that the negative shape here on the ankle there is much, much narrower. So my real shape should have been there. So when you are drawing, you are always adjusting. And I rushed in, I guess. So now I'm going to take it a bit more slowly, and I'm actually going to measure. So if I pretend that this is real shoes, I'm going to measure with my pencil, just so that you can see. But of course you can measure with your little piece of paper, as we've done previously. So if I measure from the bottom to where the heel is, that can be my measuring yardstick for everything. And I have to make a decision how big it's going to be on my page. So I'm going to decide that it's going to be that big. Remember, it's not the same there as it is here. Otherwise, if your shoes are far away, you'll end up with a tiny, tiny picture of shoes on your page. Okay, so if I measure that, I want to know now how high is the top of that tongue. And if I compare it to where the top of that is, so I sort of take it across, it's almost the same height. So if I draw a line across there and a line across there, so that's the height up to the heel. So it's a little bit bigger than that. So here I'm going to go, well, that's how big my heel is. Therefore, it's going to be a little bit further up. So I'm always drawing relative to something I've drawn before. Now, to stop myself making that same mistake and getting that too wide, I'm going to draw a line, a vertical line, at the highest point on that shoe. So I use these techniques regardless of what I am drawing. And you can see that the side of the shoe is pretty much foreshortened within there. Look, where it's turning to the front is there. So it's nearly the same. So if I measure the distance away where the point is of the tongue, and I compare that to the height, it's just a little less. So I'm going to go just a little less than what I've got. It does start to get a bit complicated, and you don't need to do it all. You can, in fact, draw loosely if you wish and pay attention, more attention than I did at the beginning, and then check your results by measuring later. But it is a bit easier to go about it like this. Okay, now I can say, where is the extreme end of the shoe? Again, comparing it to our first measurement there. Don't go and comparing it to another one, because if this is slightly out and that's slightly out, then the shoe will get crazier and crazier. So I'm comparing everything to that first measurement. And it is about 1.5-ish to the end of the shoe, maybe just over 1.5. So again, I'm going 1, and what was I saying, from there to the end? Well, let me check that. I can't remember if I measured from there or from there. So that's when it gets a bit crazy. But let's pay attention to that. So it's 1, 2, yeah, 2.5, right from the end. So it would have been 1.5 from there. So let's go back again with my pencil. So it's 1, 2.5. Can you see the half? And now I know that the toe is going to fit there. And so even if your head screams at you that it's not correct, of course shoes are longer, you will be able to go, you know what? Actually, it's working. So you can measure a lot of things. You can measure how high is the toe above there compared to that. You can measure where is that. You know, there's a million different things that you can measure, but I think I've got enough for now. So I'm going to take that, the tongue up to where I had measured, right? And I know that the end of my shoe is there. That's going a bit downwards. Yep. And it's actually, that's quite useful because that's turning a little bit there as well. And I'm looking at the angle. In fact, that line on the shoe is quite helpful because that's showing me the angle there. Don't let your head tell you that that angle is flat, because it will try to tell you that that angle is flat, because aren't shoes flat when you walk on them? And shoes are not flat unless they're thongs. So if you don't know, Australia calls slip-slops or flip-flops thongs, and in New Zealand they're called jangles. So these are called flip-flops are called thongs in Australia, and they're pretty much the only flat shoe, right? Those kinds of flat sandals, and that is not flat, it's going down. And then that is going quite high up. Okay, he's obviously sitting, so his foot is not flat on the ground. And I'm going to put the line there to represent that line. So that original yellow shape is the shape that I'm trying to get. And if I look at where the top of that is compared with the top of the heel, I can have a guess and say, oh, it's about 1/5 of the way down. So if I guess there, so guesstimates are okay, depending on how much practice I guess you get. Now, I'm looking at that and I'm going, that is no way that there's going to be a shoe in there. And this is where you have to watch out. Trust the process. Don't start second guessing and say, no, there's no ways that shoe can be like that. I'm looking at that and saying, I hope this turns out. I'm going to trust the process because I'm teaching you guys. So it better work. Ouch. I'm hoping. Okay, so that is that basic triangles, all of those things that I can see here. I'm looking at this height as well. I'm a bit worried about that. That looks way too high for my liking. Is it? Let me test again. So there's my measurement. There's my measurement. Compare it with that. It's just below. There's my measurement. Compare it with that. Ah, so it is wrong and it was worth changing. So this should be a bit lower. Okay, that is a bit more helpful. Not quite sure why I went so high, so check as you go along. Okay, laces. Don't start drawing the laces at this stage, but what I want to do is to look at what that angle is through there. So we're trying to describe the form, the three-dimensional nature of the shoe before we start putting in any of these details, okay? And that applies to absolutely everything. And if I look at that angle, it's about a 45-degree angle from the corner there, I reckon. Maybe a bit lower. So that was on the corner of the, I shouldn't have used that. That was on the corner of the photograph, so that wasn't particularly useful. But if I imagine that there's a corner there, the line of the laces is up there somewhere, and the bottom hole is on this side of that line, and it is that is very interesting. That changed my whole point of view. Look how close that circle is to that line, which I said was the top of the toe there. That's very interesting. I was about to draw it down here. So whenever you draw shoes or anything for that matter, make sure that you always compare it to something you've already drawn. Okay, so if I want to put that, so that hole there is about here somewhere, and the last hole is going to be about there. Okay, looks a bit weird still. Yep, it does. I absolutely agree. Now they're white shoes, so it's hard to see all the changes, but I'm looking for the basic line. So that line there is the same, is parallel to the line of the laces. That's the edge of the shoe. And now I'm going to look at that section. So I've gone from the big shapes to slightly smaller directional shapes. That's how you build this up. And I'm going to take that and it's going to go, it's almost at right angles to that, not quite. So it's doing something like that. Now, my head is still screaming at me that something is wrong here. So I'm going to adjust and adjust and adjust and find out. And the first thing I want to adjust is the fact that the top of the toe is quite flat before it turns that corner. With the yellow, I just took a line like that my pencil is following, and I didn't worry about this shape of the boot now, the shoe. So now I'm actually going to worry about that, and that's why this didn't look correct. So the top of the shoe is actually, the toe there is actually like that, and now it's doing that. Right? So it's still, and remember I had to change that, and I didn't end up changing the angle. I'm hoping this is going to turn into a shoe. Okay, doesn't look like a shoe yet, does it? Also, these lines might be distracting. So these were the measuring lines that I've put in. If they do become distracting, take them out. And the reason I'm drawing on here is so that you can see. I wouldn't ordinarily be drawing on my photograph. It is a good idea. Remember me saying before that you could draw on a plastic sheet, and that's probably shining, but I do want to show you very, very quickly. Now that's got a grid on it, but even if I just trace around, and I remove it, now you can see how similar that shape is to the one that I'm drawing. So if you've got a plastic sleeve and you can just draw on it like that, that will help your brain accept what you are drawing. So that's why I'm drawing on here, so that you can see it. I don't usually draw on there. Okay. Now we can come to some smaller areas like this line. When I say small areas, I mean this shape here. So smaller details, I guess. But I'm probably not going to bother at this stage to put the other side of the shoe there, because it's so tiny. It's not really going to change anything at the moment. But I do want to put this line in, which is almost parallel to that line. What line is that? Oh, that's the direction of the laces. Okay, so I'm just looking at the photograph, and they are practically parallel in the photograph. Now, I'm also checking what is the distance there compared with that, because that, if I can get my shoe again, so understanding where things are and why things are is quite important. So that section of the shoe is on the side, right? But that section of the shoe is foreshortened part of the top of the shoe. So that is interesting to know, so that I can choose how far up this is going to go. And so I'm going to put that line there, and it carries on going down. It doesn't turn the corner until it gets to here, and then it turns the corner. Don't worry about these squiggles, because it's easier to get them in the direction they're going. So a straight line and a straight line joined with a curve. Don't worry so much about the squiggles. To get the basic direction, it's easier to put straight lines on them. Now, I've also realized that underneath this is the underneath of the sole. So I'm going to put a loop like that to go underneath. I'm crossing my fingers that this is going to work. It doesn't look like anything yet, does it? Hope it works. Okay, I'm going to rub out some of these lines because they are confusing me. And my students would be teasing me about now about using erasers. And I'm adjusting, my head is wanting me to adjust this even more. I need to look at the photograph because my my photograph has been almost erased by all of these lines. Okay, good. I'm pleased I'm looking at the photograph because now I can see what I've missed. There's a line underneath there. And the line here comes from, okay, the photograph is really not clear at all. There's a line there, and then it goes to the lace, and then it goes like that. So it's good that I'm looking at the photograph. That joins up with there. That makes sense. So that was the edge of the shoe there. So don't go putting in those little stitches. Don't go putting in the writing, all of that sort of thing. That photograph is much clearer than the one I printed out, so I'm very pleased to be looking at that, helping me much more. I've done something wrong here and I'm not quite sure what it is. Maybe I should see where the bottom of that shoe is relative to the side. And I'd say it's just below halfway. The bottom of the shoe is about level with that. Oh yeah, that works. So the process is happening. Just going to tone that in because that's going to help me. Now that is parallel to that. And there's a line across there that's hardly visible. And that line, which is where I said the top of the shoe was, I haven't made it the top of the shoe. So sometimes you put marks in where you want things to be, and then you don't use them. Not very clever. Okay, so you can see I am slowly putting in some helpful shapes, hopefully. Probably a bit too loose. I must admit it is hard to demonstrate and talk at the same time, as I've mentioned before. Okay, now I want to show you how to put the laces in. I must admit that I'm not a fan of putting all the detail in, but putting in, you know, how these laces crisscross is not a bad idea. But the point I want to make is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. That's interesting. Okay. I made a pitfall mistake, and that is I have made those circular instead of oval, because when you look at circles from the side, they are oval. Can you see that? Quite disconcerting that on my telephone, when I'm looking at the video that you're all seeing, it's very delayed, but that's okay. Just means I can't see what you can see directly. 1, 2. So that one is about level there. 3. No, yeah, that was number 3. Goodness, where have I gone wrong? Something like that. Gee, shoes are hard. Whose idea was this? Okay, what I wanted to show you about the laces, and the reason I wanted to show you this is because when I teach this at the studio, many people have difficulty with this. The lace is actually going into the eyelet. So I'll show you on the real shoe. The lace is going into the eyelet, obviously. And therefore, you cannot see the rest of the eyelet underneath that lace, okay? You can also see negative shapes between the laces. So this is very easy because it's a black shoe and white laces. If we go back to here, I wonder if I can, there you go, let's get rid of some of those lines. When you draw this, you need to draw an oval there because it's not a circle, and then the lace is as wide as the eyelet. So there is very definitely some careful observation there. Okay? So some people get very lost and they draw the eyelet and then they have a lace going like that and they're not quite sure what's going on there. And what's going on is that you can't see that section of the eyelet and the lace kind of goes in to the hole there. That's how the lace works. Okay, so that's one of the reasons I wanted to show you. I'm not that bothered about getting the shading on the eyelet and all of those sorts of things. I guess you could come back later and put some shading in once you've got those laces in. And I like just suggesting, so I'm just going to suggest, you can see the top lace is not, the top eyelet hasn't got a lace in. And I'm looking at the direction of that lace and it's going like that. And I'm looking at the direction of this lace and it's going pretty much parallel. Now obviously I can't see the end of that lace. There's other things happening here, but I want to get that direction correct. And now that one is getting a bit flatter. And this one is getting a bit flatter again. And I'm beginning to see my shoe. I can't quite believe how long this has taken me. Actually, I can believe. Shoes are hard. Now, the knot on that shoe. So I've gone really complicated with this pair of shoes. I hadn't planned drawing this pair, but I thought, because of the strange foreshortening, it would be a good challenge. I will post these photographs in the on the Facebook page in case you want to use them as well, or you can draw your own shoes, or you can do both. So I'm merely looking at shapes. I've looked at the shape of that knot. Okay. I'm really not trying not to get too fussed. There's a lace that comes down and you've got to put it relative to other things, right, that you've already got. So that lace comes down. Now that we've got those laces going across, we can put in some of these ones that are coming out from the other side of the shoe. And for that, I'm going to tidy up a bit there, and I'm going to start down here. This lace ends there. So if the lines are confusing, get rid of them. I know I say draw first and rub second, But if you've actually got some confusing lines, then you need to get rid of them. So they were my original drawing lines rather than a wrong drawing of the lace. Okay, so that lace goes all the way to there, and then the next lace that comes across does that. So you've actually got to be mindful of what's going on. You've got to observe all these tiny little corners and things like that. And the fact that this obviously doesn't go through all the laces. So you've got to find out what's going on. The lace covers the edge of that shoe. And you can see this shoe is beginning to start looking a little bit more real. So that's that one. Then we come to this one, and the lace, as it comes down there, is actually meeting the underside there. So don't put it going like that if it's going there. So you have to be quite exacting if you've got such a close-up of a shoe like this. So I'm actually going to take my line up from, it's the second one. What's going on? What's going on? It's the second one, and it goes from there, and it does that. So I'm just trying to look at that shape. Okay, let's see if we can get rid of some of the lines we don't need. And in fact, oh, I'm lost. 1, 2, 3. Yes, it goes over that one. Okay. Often my students say they're so happy when they see me getting lost because it makes them feel better. Yes, these things are painstaking to draw shoes. I should have drawn the boots with no laces, but I wanted to show you how to pay attention. And I'm going to cop out and not draw the rest of the shoe. But I do want to show you, hopefully you can start to see the shoe happening there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of my construction lines and put some quick shadows in to show you, hopefully, that this is looking like a shoe. My lines are a bit heavy as well so that you can see them in the drawing. So construction line out the way, construction line out the way, and hopefully once the construction lines are out the way, you'll start seeing a better shoe. I'm hoping. Are we there yet? I'm a bit scared of this one. I think I may have bitten off more than I can chew for this demonstration. So that's maybe 1 3/4. Is it 1 3/4 here? 1. Yeah. So my brain is telling me that this is wrong. That's why I went back to check, because I thought that that looked really weird, that this shape here looked really weird. So that's why I checked. Now I'm not going to I'm feeling like I want to continue as I usually do, but I am going to just, as I said, rub out some of these distracting lines. So that's the one coming over. That's one coming over there. So we can take out that line. Is it working a little bit better now that I'm getting rid of those lines? Now, I know I've often said on these Friday demonstrations that I'll finish it later and then post what it looks like, and I never do. So I'm probably not going to finish this one either. Now, I don't like the fact that that lace ends right on the edge of the tongue in the photograph, so I might just shorten that because I find it confusing that it's going all the way there. And I'm half closing my eyes to see if this looks like a real shoe. And it looks more like a real shoe when I look at the view that you can see from the top-down camera than from my view, because that's really bothering me from my view. It's not looking good at all. But I've trusted my process, and hopefully those measurements have all worked out. Okay, I was a bit flippant with that lace there. That lace actually comes to the edge there. Okay, I think I'm going to end it there. I actually didn't mean to spend so long on the laces, but you can see that it has become a shoe. My head is still telling me that that distance is wrong somewhere. Perhaps the angle is not quite as sharp as I had it. So there are a few things that maybe I would change if I were pursuing this, but I think that is enough for now. So you can find a much simpler shoe to draw. For another Friday afternoon, it's time for me to sign out. Karen Frankel saying, get drawing. Bye-bye.